with Charlie when making brief weekend visits to his extended family. It was the third weekend in September of 1979 when Charlie and I went to visit his Uncle Hank, who lived outside of a town called Ridgefield. Uncle Hank was a retired coal miner who was, unfortunately, suffering from what is commonly known as black lung, and wasn't expected to be with us much longer. He was a great guy, nonetheless, and could really spin some incredible yarns when it came to storytelling, and we were all ears. At any rate, on this particular weekend, he told us that a lot of the good old boys were bagging quite a few crows down by the cornfields this time of year, and he asked me if I'd ever done any shooting. Truth be told, I hadn't, but I didn't want to let on, so I said I had done a little, and off we went. Hank grabbed a couple of shotguns out of a closet with a few boxes of shells, and the three of us packed into the front seat of his Ford pickup. I was the lucky one stuck with the shifter between my legs. We made it over to a place called Ridgefield, where Hank parked the truck adjacent to a field of standing corn. He handed us the guns and pointed in the direction that we should go, and that's when I realized that he wasn't going with us. He said that my lungs are much too weak to walk with you guys, but don't worry about me. I'm happy just to wait here for a few hours while you guys go out and have some fun. Charlie gave me a wink, and the two of us began to walk away. We were flanking a field of corn that was standing some 7 to 8 feet tall besides us, and as we walked, we could hear the crows in the field cawing. As of yet, we'd seen none of them. We must have walked for a mile or more, and there was still no sign of crows overhead nor a visible end to the corn on our left. We were approaching a hillside on our right when Charlie suggested that we walk up on the side so we could possibly see from a high point where the best place would be for us to shoot some of these buggers. We sat on the hillside, perched about 100 feet above the cornfield, where we could see crows hopping and flying in and around the standing corn. They were pecking at the ears that were still left on the stalks. Unfortunately, there weren't any newcomers entering the field, and none of the crows that were in there were leaving, in particular in our direction. This field was enormous, and neither of us were too keen on walking around to the other side where there seemed to be some action, so we sat and waited. About an hour into our waiting, we began to see a flurry of activity in the corn at a distance of about 400 yards away from us. There was a lot of cawing going on, with crows taking to the air and dive-bombing something in the field. But we had seen nothing of whatever it was that they were diving on. Charlie had suggested that perhaps a bobcat or some critter was walking through the field that the crows weren't too happy about, and so they were trying their best to scare it off. Up until Charlie saying this, we hadn't seen anything. The corn stalks weren't moving, and the only activity was that of the crows, who were in a complete and utter frenzy over whatever was there. It was then that what I will describe as a large furry figure stood up within the corn and was head and shoulders above it. And I do mean head and shoulders, because that is exactly what we were looking at. A large head sitting on a pair of enormous shoulders, now making its way through the cornstalks, with the crows giving chase. This thing, which we both knew was a Bigfoot, was walking through the corn, occasionally swatting at a diving crow, which it seemed that we could tell it was really annoyed by. Where it had come from was an unknown to us. We had been looking rather intently at the very area where we saw it standing, and it wasn't there just moments before us seeing it, which left us wondering. Was it sleeping on the ground within the stalks? Or perhaps it had crawled in, and if so, why? What we did know was that we were watching it, and it was an enormous animal, to say the least. We watched it walking through the stalks for probably over a quarter of a mile. It occasionally stopped and appeared to sample the corn before continuing to walk. There were a couple of moments where either the ground sloped downward or the corn was substantially taller, where the beast momentarily disappeared from our view, only to once again reappear moments later as it continued to walk. We watched it for some 10 minutes until it had apparently exited the field and was gone from sight. When we first saw it at a distance of some 400 yards or so, we estimated the creature's height at being 9 feet or better. This based on the height of the corn when we were walking next to it. I would estimate its shoulder width at being 4 to 5 feet, and its head and shoulders seemed to be one contiguous unit. In other words, there was no visible neck. When we made it back to the truck to face Uncle Hank, having not so much as fired a single round, we told him what we had seen. He shook his head and said quietly, "You fellas saw the hairy man." He couldn't believe it, and quite frankly, neither could we, despite seeing it with our own 2 eyes. He said that these critters had been reported here since white men had settled the area. Some of the old-time miners had spoken of them messing with equipment and the like, but he had never seen one for himself. Even though we hadn't gotten any crows that day, what we did get was a memory to last a lifetime.
The good old hairy man.
Yes, sirree.
The hairy man in West Virginia.
I'm telling you, man, when you least expect it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, of all the things I would have guessed with the crows circling the cornfield like that, I wouldn't have guessed hairy man.
Yeah, and interesting, too, how it apparently stood up from either a seated position, kneeling, or laying down, and then it was visible, whereas it wasn't initially, but the birds knew it was there.
Oh, yeah. Well, they got that aerial view.
Yep. So, kind of cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah, kind of cool, you know. And I see, like, the blue jays on my own property, Kev, you know, when there's a cat walking around. If those blue jays are around, they're the guys who start squawking and doing the aerial reconnaissance above the cat until they can get it out of the property.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, crows too. I mean, maybe not by you, but crows are like that. And then it's like I always hear every morning, I hear the hawks. Like, we got a bunch of red-tailed hawks, and you hear them screeching like they talk to one another when the other birds are coming after them after they raid a nest or whatever.
Yeah, you think they're calling them in for reinforcements?
I think they're calling in an airstrike, if you know what I mean. A little backup. Hey, I'm puffing red smoke. Bring it in.
Unbelievable.
Lay some napalm on us. Nothing like a little napalm.
You know, it's amazing that the old-timer says that some of the men in the mines told tales of these things messing with them. So, you know,
they were all rural, mostly rural folks, right? Working in the mines back then.
And of course where the mines were located.
Virginia. Exactly.
You know, some of them old mines, they were just drilling into the sides of mountains.
Oh, yeah.
Up there in West Virginia, Kentucky, you know, a lot of these places.
You can still see the evidence of it when you're up there. You know, and by the way, they're still doing it, you know.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that we were interlopers on their turf.
Sure.
And they probably weren't too happy about the noise and just humans being there,
100%, yeah.
Again, let's fall back to the fact that, man, if you get these guys PO'd, look out, man. Because
they're coming for you.
Yeah, I don't think you want to get a Bigfoot creature too aggravated. It's just an opinion,
Not certain about it. I mean, we haven't done an experiment, but it seems like the data indicates that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Cool. Definitely not something I want to be on the other side of. But, how about the cornfield, Walking through the cornfield, and it said it was head and shoulders above the corn because that's exactly what we were looking at.
Yeah, and corn, of course, depending on the time of the year, is pretty darn tall. I mean, I'm 6'2". It's way over my head.
Yeah. I mean, that's a standing field of corn is really, it's if you go into a real cornfield, you could probably get lost in there pretty easily. A little different than the Halloween corn maze carved out, I would imagine if you got deep enough into a field of corn and the clouds came to cover the sun, you might be wishing you didn't go in there.
100%. 100%, yeah.
Well, that's it, man. That's a crazy encounter in the cornfield in West Virginia.
That's an awesome encounter, Bill. Think of how scary that is. Like, if you were in the cornfield, like these guys were looking to shoot crows, so they're looking into the cornfield. But picture you walking through the cornfield, right? You can't see anything anyway. You barely know which way you're going. And then all of a sudden you see the hairy man in front of you. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, or hear it.
Yeah, what a nightmare that is, right?
Yeah, or smell it.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Cannot imagine. All right, Bill. Well, we got some great listener mail. A couple of these emails that came in, I was laughing out loud when I read them. So, folks, really appreciate any feedback from you out there. But some of you, were over and above the Call of Duty this week. So I got a few of those, Bill. We're gonna start out with one of my favorites. It's no surprise that it comes from one of my favorite places in the world, Australia.
An Aussie, eh?
Yeah, that's from Oz. This comes in from Teresa and her son Eli.
All right.
And she says, "Love the show. Listen every week without fail since I discovered it. The way you guys talk to each other flows like a normal everyday conversation, not forced or scripted." And I'll pause there. Believe me, folks, there's nothing about this that's scripted. So back to the email. She says, "My son Eli wanted me to tell you that the super creepy Black-Eyed Children episode was his favorite."
Wow.
And he says, "The way Kevin spoke in that slow, deadpan voice really creeped him out."
"We just want to talk to you."
"We just want to talk to you. No reason to be alarmed. Can you open the door?
Please?"
Please?" and then they write, "Bill said he'd be jacking those two little bastards." Well, that had us all laughing. When we go, I told you, Bill, it's my favorite, I think. When we go into the bush, my kids always remind me to carry more gun than you think you're going to need. And she says, "We live in Australia, and the only guns we own are Nerf guns, and we keep losing the bullets." Which, by the way, Teresa and Eli, I got some serious automatic Nerf guns around here in the house, and I'm always losing those darts, too.
Yeah. Let me tell you something, Eli. If I saw those little creeps in the camera, I'd tell them, "Hold on, I'll be right down."
"Don't worry. We're not going to hurt you. Just let us in."
"Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to hurt you."
So they talk about keep losing the Nerf bullets. So she writes, "So if we ever see a Yowie I think we would be close to breaking